This animal can regrow its own head. This one can survive being frozen solid. This one heals a hole through its own heart. This one is basically unkillable. None of this is science fiction. This is real, documented biology. Evolution built things stranger than fiction. Number 10 can lose its own organs and grow them back. Number 5 might be biologically immortal. And number 1 has survived every mass extinction in Earth's history. If real animal science blows your mind, subscribe now. Let's start the countdown. Number 10, the axolotl can lose an entire limb and within just a few weeks, regrow a perfect, fully functional replacement with bones, nerves, and blood vessels all correctly connected. This isn't rough scar tissue, it's a complete working limb that looks and functions exactly like the original one that was lost in the first place. Even more remarkably, this creature can regrow parts of its own heart, sections of its spinal cord, and even portions of its own brain without any scarring at all. A human who suffers damage to any of these areas faces permanent, often devastating consequences, while this small salamander simply repairs itself as if nothing happened. Scientists around the world are actively researching exactly how this creature's cells know precisely what to rebuild and where to rebuild it. Unlocking that mechanism could eventually help human medicine develop real treatments for spinal injuries, heart damage, and even certain forms of brain trauma. But there's a bitter irony here, because the wild population of this exact creature is critically endangered, living in only one heavily polluted lake in Mexico. The animal that could help humans regrow damaged organs is quietly disappearing from the only place on Earth it has ever called home. Number 9, the Planarian Flatworm can be cut into more than 20 separate pieces, and each individual piece will regenerate into a complete, fully functional worm with its own brain and organs. This means a single worm can technically become more than 20 separate, genetically identical individuals within about 2 weeks of the original cutting. Even the piece containing no original head tissue whatsoever will fully regrow a brand new brain, complete with the ability to learn and remember things again. In a genuinely bizarre experiment, researchers trained planarian worms to navigate a maze, then cut off their heads entirely and let them regrow completely new ones. Astonishingly, the worms with completely new brains still remembered how to solve the exact same maze, suggesting memory might somehow be stored outside the brain itself. This finding genuinely challenges a core assumption in neuroscience, since memory has traditionally been thought to exist exclusively within brain tissue and nowhere else in the body. Some researchers now believe memory traces might be stored in cellular patterns throughout the worm's entire body, not just inside the brain that was completely removed. Number 8. The wood frog survives winter by allowing its own body to freeze almost completely solid, with its heart stopping entirely and no detectable breathing for weeks at a time. By any conventional medical definition, this frog is essentially clinically dead during this period, with up to 65% of the water in its body turned into solid ice. The frog survives this by producing enormous amounts of glucose that act like a natural antifreeze, protecting its individual cells from being destroyed by sharp ice crystals. When spring arrives and temperatures rise, the frog simply thaws out over several hours, and its heart spontaneously restarts on its own without any outside intervention. Researchers are actively studying this exact freezing and thawing mechanism for potential use in human organ preservation, hoping to extend how long donated organs survive before transplant. A creature that essentially dies every winter and comes back to life every spring is quietly rewriting what scientists thought they understood about the actual boundaries of life and death. We're 3 animals in, and everything from here gets significantly stranger. If you're already hooked, go ahead and subscribe right now before we continue. Number 7. A deer's antlers are the only mammalian body part on Earth that fully regrows every single year, and they're the fastest growing bone tissue known in the entire animal kingdom. During peak growth season, a large deer's antlers can grow up to 2.5 centimeters in a single day, an astonishing rate for actual living bone tissue. While growing, the antlers are covered in a soft, blood vessel-rich layer called velvet, which supplies the nutrients needed to fuel this incredibly rapid bone construction. Once fully grown, the deer's body cuts off blood supply to the antlers entirely, and the velvet dries up and is deliberately rubbed off against trees. Then, months later, the entire antler structure is shed completely and falls off, only for the whole growth process to begin again from scratch the following year. Researchers studying antler regeneration are hoping to understand how deer regrow such massive bone structures repeatedly without any of the complications that bone regrowth typically causes in humans. An animal casually growing and shedding an entire bone structure every single year might quietly hold answers to some of modern medicine's most difficult bone repair questions. Number 6. The zebrafish can suffer damage to up to 20% of its own heart and within roughly 2 months, fully regenerate the missing tissue with zero permanent scarring. A human heart that suffers similar damage, such as from a heart attack, forms permanent scar tissue instead, which never regains the ability to contract and pump blood properly again. Scientists have discovered that zebrafish heart cells can actually revert to an earlier, more flexible developmental state, essentially becoming capable of dividing and rebuilding again. Human heart cells almost completely lose this flexible, dividing ability shortly after birth, which is exactly why heart attack damage in humans is considered permanent and irreversible. Cardiac researchers around the world are studying zebrafish specifically to figure out how to potentially reactivate this same regenerative ability inside human heart tissue. A tiny aquarium fish might genuinely hold the key to one day helping human heart attack survivors regrow the exact tissue that current medicine still cannot repair. Number 5. There's a species of jellyfish so small it could sit comfortably on your fingernail, and when it gets old, sick, or injured, it doesn't die the way every other animal does. Instead, it reverts its own cells back to an earlier stage of life, essentially transforming itself back into a baby version of itself, and then simply grows up all over again. Scientists call this process transdifferentiation, and it's the only confirmed case in the entire animal kingdom of a creature actually reversing its own biological age. In laboratory conditions, researchers have watched individual jellyfish cycle backward through this process dozens of times in a row, meaning this creature could theoretically keep doing this forever. This means the only thing that actually kills this jellyfish in the wild is being eaten by a predator, because old age itself simply isn't a threat to it at all. Researchers are now studying its cells specifically to understand what triggers human aging, because whatever switch this jellyfish figured out might eventually help us understand our own. A creature small enough to fit on your fingernail may genuinely have solved the one problem every other living thing on this planet has never been able to escape. Number 4. An octopus arm contains its own independent mini brain, and when an arm is lost entirely, the octopus can regrow it completely within a matter of weeks. Researchers have actually observed severed octopus arms continuing to reach for and grab food on their own for several minutes after being separated from the animal's body entirely. This happens because each arm's independent mini-brain continues operating for a short period even without any connection to the central brain controlling the rest of the body. The regenerated arm eventually regrows every single component of the original, including suckers, chromatophores for color changing, and the full independent nerve network. Scientists studying this exact regeneration process are hoping to understand how a creature can regrow such a genuinely complex, semi-independent limb without any of the complications typically seen in other regenerating species. A creature that can lose a fully functioning mini-brain and simply grow an entirely new one back within weeks continues to challenge everything researchers thought they understood about complex regeneration. Number 3. The tardigrade, also called the water bear, can voluntarily reduce its own metabolism to nearly 0% of normal activity, essentially pressing pause on its own biological processes almost entirely. In this dormant state, it can survive temperatures colder than -200 degrees Celsius, temperatures hotter than 150 degrees Celsius, and complete dehydration for up to 30 years. In 2007, scientists launched tardigrades directly into the vacuum of outer space with no protection whatsoever, and they returned alive and healthy enough to reproduce shortly afterward. It can also survive radiation levels 1,000 times stronger than what would instantly kill a human, a level of resistance that still genuinely puzzles radiation biologists today. Some scientists now genuinely believe that if a global catastrophe were ever severe enough to end nearly all life on Earth, this creature would likely be among the very last survivors standing. A creature invisible to the naked eye has survived conditions extreme enough to destroy nearly every other form of life this planet has ever produced. Number 2. The electric eel can generate up to 860 volts of electricity directly from its own body, roughly 7 times stronger than a standard household electrical outlet. Roughly 80% of this fish's entire body is essentially a biological battery, made up of thousands of specialized cells stacked together specifically to generate and store electrical charge. It uses this ability not just to stunt and hunt prey, but also to navigate murky, low-visibility water using weaker electrical pulses that function almost exactly like a built-in radar system. A strong discharge from a large adult electric eel is powerful enough to knock a grown adult human completely off their feet within a fraction of a second. Researchers have even successfully used the electrical discharge from a live electric eel to briefly power small electronic devices, proving this fish is functioning as a literal, living power source. A living creature that is simultaneously a battery, a weapon, and a radar system all at once remains one of the most genuinely overpowered animals alive on Earth today. And now, number 1. This next animal has survived all 5 of the major mass extinction events in Earth's entire history, including the one that wiped out the dinosaurs completely. The animal is the humble horseshoe crab, a creature that has remained almost completely unchanged for over 450 million years, making it far older than the dinosaurs themselves. Its blood is a striking bright blue color, and it contains a compound so uniquely effective at detecting dangerous bacteria that it's still used today to test the safety of nearly every vaccine and injectable medicine produced worldwide. This means that nearly every safe vaccine ever administered to a human being has been tested using blood collected directly from this ancient, unchanged creature. Its immune system has remained genuinely effective against bacteria for hundreds of millions of years without needing to evolve significantly, an evolutionary stability almost unheard of anywhere else in nature. Conservationists are now working to develop a synthetic alternative to this creature's blood, because the growing global demand for vaccine testing has placed increasing pressure on wild horseshoe crab populations. A creature old enough to have watched the dinosaurs rise and fall has quietly become one of the most medically important animals alive on Earth today, almost entirely unnoticed by the general public. 10 animals, a salamander that regrows its own heart, and a flatworm that becomes 20 separate worms from a single body. A frog that freezes completely solid every winter, and a deer that regrows an entire bone structure every single year. A fish that heals its own heart with zero scarring, and a jellyfish that may genuinely never die of old age. An octopus that regrows an entire independent mini-brain, and a microscopic creature that survived the vacuum of outer space itself. A fish that's essentially a living battery, and an ancient creature whose blue blood quietly keeps nearly every vaccine on Earth safe. If this genuinely changed how you see the animal kingdom, subscribe now, because next week we're covering 10 more, and honestly, some of them are even harder to believe than this list.